Emotional monopoly is about assimilating our emotional experience to the people around us and letting go of this emotional monopoly where we think we have a shared emotional experience with others can make you a little bit happier. You're listening to the Bear in Mind podcast, episode 161.
A podcast that breaks it down so you can break the cycle for good. Now, your host, Tara Rama, but you can call her T.
This episode was inspired by two things coming together around the same time. So I was reading a book, Trust by Hernan Diaz, and in it he describes one of the characters as having an emotional monopoly. And then I was on social media and there were two people who were answering questions about why somebody wasn't, like why their friends weren't happy when they had got a new job. They had worked so hard to get a job and they got it. And one of their really good friends was not happy. And so on the social media, they were answering this response. So those two things came together. And I thought about this episode because emotional monopoly is when we think that our emotional experience, what we're experiencing now, is relevant to the people around us or even relevant to society, your culture. The sentiment is shared. And this happens to the best of us. I know that I have been in situations very similar to the post I saw on social media where something really fun or something good or positive happened in my life. And I share that with people and then I don't receive the same kind of, hey, or I don't even receive like congratulations. And it may seem like, well, why can't our family and friends be happy for us? And right then and there, you're experiencing something positive and you want other people to share in that sentiment, in some sort of shared positive feeling, and it doesn't happen. And then what ends up happening with us? We're a little less happy. We're a little less positive. And because we kind of have this expectation, and we do this a lot. We even do it down to if somebody dies, somebody we know in a family or in a group of friends or something, somebody passes away, we think the shared sentiment is mourning and loss and sadness. And we never think that maybe somebody's emotional experience from that loss might be relief. And in some ways, having this sort of emotional monopoly does bring about connection. There's a shared sentiment in something. And it isn't that it's wrong or it's bad, because I still do it. And this is why I didn't tie it in necessarily to saying that it's kind of narcissistic or something. It's not something bad, because a lot of times we can connect with people this way. We have some sort of shared emotional experience. If we go through loss together, that connects us. And I think that when we can see in certain situations, especially I think this is a little bit easier to see when you are experiencing a positive emotion and other people aren't, or you're experiencing something contrast to what the group feels. And it could even be as subtle as, I didn't like this book. I hated this book. And everybody's like, I loved it, 5 stars. When you can see that contrast, you're happy, other people aren't happy, or you're mad and other people aren't mad, it can bring awareness of that is maybe emotional monopoly happening where we think there's kind of going to be this shared sentiment. So in particular, when you are experiencing positive emotions and you're excited about something and you go to share it with the people that are the dearest to you and you love them, and their response is not with a lot of luster, what do? Because you want that, right? You want that. And the question maybe to ask yourself is, why do you want that? Why do you want your family and friends to be happy about this great thing that happened to you? That's maybe the more relevant question, because you're happy in your emotional state, and the requirement that other people share in that sentiment about your news somehow detracts away from your feeling. And it's almost like we need them to be happy so we can be happier. But really what we need is just to be happy about our situation, about what's happened to us, and then separate out their own emotional experience and what's going on, and understand the two emotional experiences are absolutely separated. They're on the other side of the fence. And it isn't that we're not affected. It's not like, oh, you're cold and you're not affected by your family members, people that you love. But you can understand a little bit that they're going through an emotional experience. And I actually responded on social media to this to answer this question, because a lot of times when we share good news, our friend or family member is going through something that maybe we don't know about, we don't understand, and they are not in the best of places. It could be they're coming off a bad week. Their pet was sick, they were sick, all of those things. And then you hit them with this fantastic news, and they're reeling in from a week of maybe a lot of negative emotion, and they are not able to absorb this information. And so it has nothing to do with what has happened to you or your relationship. And so seeing that kind of separation between the two can give you, I think, a little bit of relief, saying I can be happy and I can give myself that happiness and not require other people to give me that happiness so that I prolong this positive feeling that I have. Knowing that you can give it to yourself anytime and not kind of put a requirement, and I would even say maybe even a little burden on other people that they fulfill some sort of need that to raise your happiness or to keep the positive emotion prolonged. And on the flip side, when you have an emotional experience that is very different from your family and friends, and I see this very often, it's around politics, it's about stuff that's happening in the news. People have different emotional experiences, they have different beliefs even. This could be even around it, and you feel like you're the outlier, like you think differently about this. And this often happens to me. I think differently about a lot of things as I've increased my awareness of how I think and what I believe, and intentionally said, okay, I'm going to believe this. I'm going to choose to believe this, and created a lot of different beliefs for myself than the ones that I originally had growing up in even 5 years ago. And we often think, well, if it's my emotional experience and somebody else is having a different, or a group of people are having different, then there is this overwhelming need to communicate it, to maybe even in the back of our minds say maybe stand our ground. Or maybe there's on the other side of it, you're ashamed of it and you don't want to communicate it. So here's the thing, communication is an action, and you're still having this emotional experience, or you're having this way of thinking about something that's in contrast to other people, that's going against the monopoly, let's say. And you get to decide if you want to communicate it or not. Know that your emotional experience is yours and it's allowed. And it's that other side of what I've just talked about, that somebody else doesn't need to be happy for you in order for you to feel the fullness of your happiness. The same is true as if you have a contrast emotion that goes against society, that goes against a group, is you give yourself that permission. You allow that emotional experience that you're having to whatever it is. If it's relief of a loss of a person, relief of a loss of a relationship, and everyone thinks that you should be sad, but you're secretly relieved and happy that you're no longer in this friendship or other relationship. And you can give yourself that permission. The other people don't need to give you that permission. They're having their emotional experience to your news. If you're like, oh, I broke up with somebody, and they expect that you're going to be devastated and eating tubs of ice cream, and you're not, and you're okay, then you can give that to yourself just as much as you can give happiness to yourself. That is what happens when we can separate out that. We stop the monopoly of it. And it doesn't mean it doesn't ever come up that we don't have shared emotional experiences, because that is what can connect us. But knowing that both parties are sharing in that and communicating that with each other in an honest and genuine way, that brings about true connection. That's all I have for you this week. I'll check back with you next.
Thanks for listening. Listen for a new episode next Tuesday by subscribing on your favorite podcast platform. Bye for now.